During a tense live TV broadcast, a self-important journalist attempted to corner Ibrahim Traoré with sharp, belittling questions. But what followed caught everyone off guard. Traoré's calm and steady response did not just counter the journalist's points, it left the entire studio stunned into silence. The moment quickly spread online, highlighting his clarity, composure, and firm leadership. Studio lights beamed down. Cameras were live. The host, Alan Diarra, well known for cornering his guests, leaned in, a smug grin on his face. Across from him sat a composed man in a modest military outfit. No bodyguards, no aides. Just him, President Ibrahim Traoré, the transitional head of Burkina Faso. Alan jumped right in. "Mr. Traoré," he began, his voice sharp, "how does a man with no political training lead a country struggling with violence and poverty?" There was a pause. A heavy silence filled the air. Producers behind the scenes exchanged nervous looks. Alan was not done. He laughed lightly, then added, "Some say you're just playing soldier in a serious game. What do you say to that?" The room went still. One assistant dropped her clipboard. Another muted her mic and murmured, "This is going too far." Yet President Traoré remained unmoved. He met Alan's gaze, not with anger, but with quiet force, and replied slowly, "Do you demand proof from those who give everything for their people? Or do you stand beside them and ask what more you can offer?" The silence deepened. That was only the beginning. As the camera focused on Traoré's face, across town a boy named Karim sat cross-legged on a worn carpet. He was 10, in an oversized shirt with a ripped collar. Beside him, his grandmother coughed gently. She had been unwell for weeks. The TV signal flickered. Still, the boy stared intently at the screen. He did not know politics. He barely knew who the man in the uniform was. But something in Ibrahim's voice felt familiar, like a father, like someone who had once slept on the ground, like someone who knew. Back in the studio, Alan leaned forward again. "You speak of sacrifice, Mr. President, but are you ready to admit your administration has failed where others warned you?" Karim's small hands curled into fists. He whispered, "Let him finish. Just let him finish." On screen, Traoré gave a soft smile. "I did not come here to claim I am flawless," he said. "I came to serve, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard." Karim blinked. He had never heard a leader say that before. In that moment, he felt something he had not in a long time. Hope. Upstairs in the control room, a producer named Lucy wiped sweat from her brow. She had arranged the interview for attention, for controversy, to catch Traoré off balance. She had not expected this. She had not expected dignity. As Ibrahim calmly answered the next tough question, her hand shook over the switchboard. Then suddenly a call came through on the direct line. It was from the Prime Minister's office. Her heart skipped. "Do not cut the feed," a voice commanded. "Let the people hear him. Let the truth come through." Back on the set, Alan launched another sharp question. "Tell us, Mr. President, why should we believe that you, a man without a political family or elite ties, can lead this nation?" The camera moved in closer. Traoré spoke, steady and clear, like a river, strong, calm, and unshaken. "Because I was that boy who sold mangoes to pay for school. Because I still walk where others ride. And because power to me is not a prize. It is a duty. And I carry it for them." Lucy wiped her eyes. She was not sure why she felt emotional, but she could sense something important was unfolding. Backstage, a young intern named Adama stood frozen. It was his first week at the station. He was supposed to be by the water table, refilling bottles, but he had wandered behind the curtain, unable to look away. He had never seen the president this close before. Not with guards, not delivering a fiery speech, but simply answering questions. Calm, measured, like someone who understood hardship. Adama's father, a soldier, had died last year fighting extremists in the north. Since then, Adama had avoided anything linked to the army. But as he watched Traoré speak about carrying the people's burdens, something shifted inside him. This was not a man seeking power. This was someone standing alone, carrying the weight of millions. "I see your medals," the journalist said, bitterly. "But do medals feed the people?" Traoré looked at him and replied softly, "No, they do not. But the sacrifices behind them protect the ones who do the feeding. Adama gasped. For the first time since his father's funeral, he smiled and quietly said, "Papa would have followed this man." Back in a small living room in the outskirts of Bobo Dioulasso, Karim sat quietly, tears falling, not loud ones, just the quiet kind that come when a child understands something too big for his heart. His grandmother had dozed off next to him, her breathing weak, and on screen the man in a military uniform, who spoke not like a fighter but like a teacher, continued. The journalist raised his voice again. "What makes you think you know what this country needs?" Traore paused, then answered, "Because I have slept in the rain. I have taught kids with no shoes. I have buried friends with no coffins. I know pain. I know hunger, and I have seen hope when everything seemed lost." Karim's chest tightened. He remembered being sent home from school for not paying his fees. He remembered crying in his grandmother's arms that night. And now this man, this president, was speaking for boys like him. He grabbed his school notebook and began sketching the face on the screen. Underneath it, he wrote one word: hope. Up in the control room, Lucy stared at the live stats. 100,000, 530,000, 780,000. The numbers were climbing fast. She had expected controversy, maybe an outburst, a live misstep. But what unfolded instead was a lesson in humility. Alan, the host, was losing control. His questions became sharper, now clearly anxious. "But is it not true," he demanded, "that some believe your leadership is just military theater?" Traore gave a quiet smile. "There are those who wear the uniform to rule, and those who wear it to protect. I chose the second." For the first time, the studio audience clapped. Alan froze. That reaction had not been part of the plan. Lucy's assistant leaned in and whispered, "Should we cut the feed?" Lucy stayed silent. She could not. Quiet tears ran down her face. Years ago, her father had called her from the front lines. It was a short call, just enough to say goodbye before his final mission. She had buried that memory deep, but now, the man speaking on TV, he was bringing her father's voice back, not with the same words, but through honesty, and that honesty was breaking through her defenses. As the cameras kept rolling, the studio fell into a deep silence, not the awkward kind filled with nervous laughs. This one was heavy, like a heart waiting for a beat. Alan, the journalist, had just asked a harsh question. "Do you ever feel guilty sitting in power while mothers bury their sons? Even the crew winced, but Traore stayed calm. He looked up and replied quietly, "Every single night." His voice wavered slightly, but just enough to be real. "I write their names in my journal. I meet their families. I walk their streets. Power does not shield me from pain. It makes me carry it." No applause followed, no reaction. Just truth, settling like dust. Alan stared at his notes, unsure of what to ask next. Backstage, Adama wiped his face again and noticed his hands were wet. The same boy who once felt resentment toward the army now saw things differently. Because for the first time, it seemed like someone in charge actually cared. "I visited a camp in Kaya," Traore said, adjusting his jacket, "and met a young girl named Aminata." The camera tightened in. The room cooled. She was 7. Her father had been killed in an attack. Her mother died from illness. She was alone. But she smiled. Alan raised an eyebrow. "And what does that have to do with policy?" Traore looked at him, not with anger, but with sadness. "Everything," he said. "She told me, if I can smile, maybe others will too." That girl reminded me, leadership is not about control. It is about helping people heal. Again, the room stilled. Somewhere in the audience, a woman broke down in tears. Her name was Keita. She had lost her son to a roadside explosion 3 years earlier. Since then, she had avoided anything related to politics, but today her heart felt something different. Not more pain, but relief. Finally, someone was not reading from a script. Finally, someone was speaking with sincerity. Back in the control room, the phones would not stop ringing. Lucy's assistant called out, "We've got calls from Mali, Ivory Coast, Ghana." Another voice added, "France just aired a segment. Look at this." Traore had not once raised his voice, but the world was tuned in. Alan, now visibly nervous, gave one more try. "If you really care about the people, would you not step aside and let a civilian take charge?" It was a trap, clear and sharp, but Traore nodded. Yes, one day. But not now. The house is on fire, and I am the one holding the hose. He leaned forward slightly. When the fire is out, I will step aside, not for applause, but so the next leader can build without fear of flames. The cameraman whispered. Mere. Alan leaned back, at a loss for words. Everyone in the studio felt it. Something had changed. This was no longer just politics. It had become personal. Across Burkina Faso, fathers pulled their sons closer, mothers reached for tissues, children stared at the screen, their minds holding on to a new word, respect. As the country leaned in to listen, a staff member stepped forward and handed Traore a folded note. Mid-interview, he read the note silently. His eyes remained fixed, unblinking. Then he looked up at the camera. Permission to share something. Alan gave a nod, not sure what to expect. This is a letter, Traore said. From Captain Sidibe. He died yesterday in Djibo. He asked me to read this if anything ever happened to him. The studio went quiet again. Traore's voice remained steady. Mr. President, if I die, please tell my son why I fought. Not for medals, not for power, but so he can one day play football without gunfire in the background. So he can walk to school wearing both shoes. So he can smile. Traore carefully folded the letter and slipped it into his jacket. Captain Sidibe was 31. His wife is watching this now with their 3-year-old son. The camera turned to Alan's pale face. In the control room, Lucy's hands trembled. Across the country, people were not just watching. They were feeling. Right before the break, Traore caught everyone off guard. I would like to invite someone, he said. Alan looked confused. Excuse me? Traore gestured toward the side curtain. A young woman in her 20s walked out. She wore simple clothes, but stood with quiet strength. This, Traore said, is Fatima. She is a nurse. She has been working alone at a hospital in the conflict zone of Fada and Gourma. The audience stirred. Fatima gave a modest wave. Traore stepped aside. She spoke. I have stitched wounds with no pain medicine. I have held children who had no family left. But I do it because our people matter. Her voice shook. Last week, rebels attacked our clinic. I hid 2 babies under a table with my body. If the army had not come, if not for President Traore's action, they would not be here. Alan stayed silent. The audience sat still. The truth had entered the room, and it wore a nurse's face. Outside the studio, hundreds had gathered. Some held candles, others watched through windows. This was no longer just an interview. It had become something more. The station planned a commercial break. But Traore leaned into the microphone. 1 minute, he quietly told the host. The crew hurried to adjust. He looked straight into the camera. My father was a farmer. My mother taught me to read under a mango tree. We had no electricity. But we had love. That is what shaped me. Not titles, not uniforms. He paused. Then added, I do not claim to be perfect, but every choice I make, I ask, would my mother be proud? Would that little boy in Djibo understand? There were no lights flashing now. Just a deep, steady silence. Outside the building, the crowd began to sing the national anthem, softly. Inside, Fatima covered her mouth to hold back tears. In a small tea shop, Adama stood up without realizing. Back in the studio, the cameras kept rolling. No one dared to cut away. In under 48 hours, the interview had changed. It was no longer about politics. It was a moment of truth, a wake-up call, a reflection. The world had not expected what Ibrahim Traoré was turning into. Just as the cameras came back, Traoré surprised everyone again. I received a message yesterday, he said softly, from a 12-year-old boy in the north. He pulled a folded page from his coat. His name is Yakuba. He read slowly, letting each word land. Dear Mr. President, I want to be brave like you. My father died when bandits came. My mother cries at night. I do not want toys. I just want to feel safe. Please, do not give up on us, Yakuba. Alan's jaw tightened. He stayed silent. Traoré looked straight into the camera. I hear you, Yakuba, and I am not giving up. In a small village, 600 kilometers away, Yakuba sat beside his mother, listening. On a neighbor's old radio, she quietly cried. In the studio there was silence. Viewers at home were moved. At that moment, it no longer felt like politics. It felt personal. For many, this was the first time they saw a leader not as someone on a stage, but as a father, a brother, a protector, someone who listened. Alan finally broke the silence, his tone softer now. But Mr. President, is this emotional moment not just theater? Is it not easier to read letters than to rebuild a country? The air went still. Traore did not flinch. He stood, walked to the center of the room, and sat on the floor. Few even breathed. I walked to school without shoes. I shared food from a single bowl with 10 cousins. My leadership does not come from theory. It comes from experience. He looked into the camera. If you think this is just performance, then you have missed the meaning. This is not about me. It is about what we owe to those who have lost everything. Even Alan lowered his gaze. Traore's voice softened. I am not performing. I am remembering. That sentence struck a chord, not only in the studio but across the entire country. Veterans at home saluted. Mothers held their children. Even Alan's producer wiped her eyes. And still the response was just beginning. That night, few slept. By 9:01 p.m., the streets of Ouagadougou were filled with candlelight. No one had planned it. It just happened. People gathered quietly, children holding hands, elderly men carrying flags. Women stood holding photos of loved ones they had lost. The city was not burning, but glowing. Not with fear, but with hope. A soft chant passed from group to group. Nous sommes unis, nous sommes unis. Traore stood at the window of his modest home. He turned to his aide. Not a word from me, he whispered. Let the people speak now. In a small clinic, Fatima placed her candle beside a picture of Captain Sidibe in Djibo. Yakuba's mother held him closer. And at the TV station, Alan sat alone, watching the replay of the interview on a small screen. He paused the video at Traore's final words. I am not performing. I am remembering. He stared. For the first time, he saw what real leadership looked like. But something unexpected was about to unfold. Something that would shift everything. Outside the station, the atmosphere was tense. Word spread quickly. The journalist who had once tried to embarrass President Ibrahim Traoré had not appeared in public for 2 days. Alain Diarra, once praised for his sharp questions and quick wit, was now in quiet struggle, alone with his thoughts. Inside his apartment, unshaven and uneasy, he watched the interview again, for what felt like the 100th time. Every word he spoke, every glance, every attempt to trap Traoré now sounded harsh. What stayed with him most was the president's calm. Traoré had not answered with anger, but with steady honesty. Alan turned toward the window. He saw 2 children walking barefoot on the dusty street, laughing. They had nothing in their hands, just a stick and a dream. He remembered when he was like them, when he wanted to use his voice to stand up for the unheard, not tear down those who served them. He sat on the floor and cried. Then he stood up. He knew what he needed to do, something beyond a simple apology. Something people would remember. Alan asked for airtime the next morning. At first, the station was hesitant, but when they saw the seriousness in his eyes, they agreed. He entered the same studio. Same chair, same camera. But this time, no suit, just a plain shirt and a quiet face. When the red light came on, he looked directly into the camera. Not with pride, but with an honest voice that shook slightly. I let you all down, he said. I tried to challenge a man who has dedicated his life to keeping our people safe. I used my platform to divide when I should have helped bring people together. He paused, his eyes filled with tears. But President Traoré showed me, and everyone, what true leadership means. He stood, his ground not for himself, but for every child, mother, and soldier in Burkina Faso. That is the kind of leader I now respect. The nation was silent. Then came applause, then tears, then, unexpectedly, the studio door opened. Traoré walked in. No one had called him, but he was welcome. He placed his hand on Alan's shoulder. This is how we begin to heal, he said. That evening, Traoré did not head to a palace or any official meeting. He walked the streets of Ouagadougou, Alan at his side. No cameras, no guards. On the edge of the city, they reached a small village where some young boys were playing barefoot with sticks. One of the boys ran up and asked, "Are you the man on TV?" Traoré smiled. "I am. But more importantly, I am here to serve you." The boy tilted his head. You serve people? Traore bent down beside him. Every true leader does. A bystander captured that moment on their phone. The video spread quickly across Africa. Traore holding the boy's hand, walking him home. That week ended not with speeches or loud celebration, but with quiet moments of respect, of second chances, and unity. And from that day on, Burkina Faso remembered not the debate, but the healing, not the questions, but the answers. Did this story touch you? Did it make you pause, maybe feel something real? Then do not leave without showing it. Like this video to share the message of dignity and leadership. Comment, I believe in hope, if the message of truth and unity reached you. Subscribe if you want more real stories, ones that affect lives and maybe even nations. Let us remind the world, the strongest voice does not always shout, and the greatest power is love for your people.